Morning. Hope everyone is doing well on this Wednesday. One of the things that yesterday we talked about Hagar, and we talked about the question of where are you going and where have you been, and we started looking at her story, and I want to actually continue looking at her story because there's some other interesting things here that I think are important. And so we were in Genesis 16. We had left off at verse 8, where the Hagar, the servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? She said, I am fleeing from my mistress Sarai. So start at verse 9. This is the continuation of the story. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her. The angel of the Lord said to her, I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be numbered for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said to her, behold, you are pregnant and shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. He shall be a wild donkey of a man, and his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he shall dwell over against all his kinsmen. And so she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, you are a God of seeing. For she said, truly here I have seen him who looks after me. Therefore the well was called Ber Lahai Roi. It lies between Kadesh and Bered. And Hagar bore Abraham a son, and Abram called the name of his son, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram. So it's the thing that as I read this, just a couple things. One of them is, I do struggle with the fact that, well, the angel said, well, go back and submit to Sarai, though Sarai had really was oppressing her, and there's a whole bunch of issues with the overall arch of this story and the idea of power, and she was essentially a servant that was forced into being a surrogate in some way, shape, and form, and would have had the some of the statuses of a wife, but it still was different. I struggle with that because there's a lot of things, and really, we can get to that later. We may talk about that some later point. But here, the angel gives a blessing. Says, I will multiply your offspring so they can't be numbered. That's a huge deal in the ancient world. Your offspring were your legacy, and that's part of the whole issue of the story of Sarai and Abram, is that they did not have children. They did not have a legacy, but God had promised them that. And so, and then the angel essentially tells her what to name the child. Naming of someone is important because and Ishmael means literally God hears. And so there is something to all this, but what I find really fascinating is, like I said, names are important, and the naming of something is vital. And in this passage, you have the first time in the Bible that someone gives a title to God. That's important because, and we may just kind of rush over this sometimes, but in verse 13 it says, so she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, you are a God of seeing. Essentially, and literally that could mean the God who sees me. Because that's what she names the well. It's the living well of the one who sees me. And so she names God. Now, get this. This is the first person in the Bible to give a title or name to God. There's really some interesting. First of all, it's a servant or a slave. It's a woman. She doesn't end up being part of the lineage of the people of Israel, but she still is there as the first person to name God, to say something about this is who you are, God, and so I'm giving you this title because this is my experience of you. That's powerful. But she's also someone who is afflicted, who is in need. She's in the wilderness, running away from a bad situation. And so God blesses her through the angel of the Lord. And she grants this name. She gives this title to God, the God who sees me. Because God saw her and came to her. The idea of God being the God who sees me, who sees you in our afflictions, as we celebrate, as we struggle, as things are going, all right, as we go through our day to day. That's powerful. Today, I want you to know that we serve a God who sees each of us, who knows each of us, who loves each of us. I just pray that you would take time this week to think about that He sees us as we're at home having our coffee, as if we're, Janet, we're on the way to Philadelphia to the doctors. He sees us and He's with us there. He sees us as we're in the midst of this pandemic and we're going stir crazy and we're trying to, just hope on to, okay, something new is going to happen and there will be a new normal and it will be great. He sees us as we struggle in that. He saw Hagar and wasn't okay with just letting her be in her situation and essentially just being on her own, but came to her. And in seeing her, came to her and blessed her. I think that's powerful. Those are just some things to think about today. I hope you guys are doing well.